Hello everyone, I am here in Baku for the climate conference COP29. Today is the last day of the conference. It's been 2 weeks and I have had some observations since I came on the 17th in the second week. The first one is on the extent of global warming that we are already likely to see in the future. I attended a UNEP side event. It was on the emissions gap report. No more hot air, please. I think that's the title of the report. One slide in the side event that really caught my attention was that there is almost 100% probability that we are going to hit the 1.5 degrees rise in climate change, the global warming. If we continue to do things the way we are doing, and even if the given NDCs are met. So 1.5 degrees looks a greater certainty now. Now we have to talk about 2 degrees. There is a 94% chance that we may also hit the 2 degrees temperature rise if the current commitments, the way we are doing it, continue. So there's clearly an urgency now to increase our ambitions, step up our actions on mitigation. Mitigation anyways has had its window, a really long window. This is the 29th COP. So the window is getting smaller now. I think what is becoming more apparent is that adaptation is the need of the hour more than it was before. We are already likely to be at 1.5 degrees and headed towards a 2 degree warmer world. If we have to avoid that, we definitely need to mitigate. Well, some estimates say that we need to reduce our emissions by half by 2030, which is like in 6 years. But I would say that in addition to keeping those ambitions alive, we also need to adapt to the changes already underway. That's my first takeaway. And the second is at another side event, I saw a speaker talking about the problems with boundary settings. The speaker said that the amount of money that goes into adaptation is a mix of many things actually, and it's very difficult to track. If a natural disaster happens, then there is humanitarian aid that comes, there is the disaster relief funds, and there are also some amount of activities happening through the adaptation fund, and it all gets clubbed together on the ground when things have to be done, the emergency responses. So while the total amount of money seems okay, relatively okay, the amount of money that has gone into disaster relief and adaptation, the speaker was saying that it's very difficult to separate them. And then she said that, is it good to separate these? I think it is more to do with the boundary conditions, that the boundary setting that we have created, that this is humanitarian aid, this is disaster, this is adaptation. And she said there are problems with setting these boundaries. It's not always beneficial to set these boundaries. So that was my second takeaway, the problems with boundaries. Are they helping us enough? Are they causing some side effects, some issues for tracking? Something that we must think about. The third was when I heard the local Amazon natives who did a side event, and they say there is a lot of large-scale infrastructure that is happening in there, electricity and power, which is causing some problems for the rivers there. The rivers are becoming more brown. There is a tangible reduction in the amount of fish that they could harvest earlier. So while the infrastructure is beneficial, the electricity infrastructure, it is also causing some difficulties for them in terms of the natural resources, even food security, because they depend on the fish. The extent of natural fires in the native vegetation has also increased. That's what I heard, and it's quite a substantial increase that has happened. So there are some stressors in and around the Amazon ecosystem, partly to do with the way we are developing large-scale infrastructure, and secondly the natural causes happening due to climate change. People were also vocal about the fact that all development initiatives are not necessarily co-created in consultation with the locals. So the benefits of those interventions does not really reach them the way they want it to reach them. So they were saying the local people are not part of the decision-making processes, planning processes, and maybe that's one thing that they would like to see changing in the future. And I think this is a generic problem across communities around the world. I went to a UNICEF side event, and it was interesting to see that they have an ambassador, child ambassador, who's 14 years of age, and he came up with a banner which he showed at the side event, and he said, "We need to have COP for children." I found it interesting and exciting. I feel children need to be involved in the process. They do have a voice because the future of climate change, the changing climate making the world more uncertain. I think children would be at the receiving end in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So it's important if we start having their voices and their voices being heard, to give them a platform. COP for children, I found it interesting. It adds a layer of complexity to the already very complex processes of climate negotiations. But yeah, I think I liked hearing COP for children. And then at the side event that I moderated, I really felt that people are more and more wanting to work on the inner dimensions of climate change. We are rationally, scientifically trying to fix the system outside, but what about the system inside? And there were some talks on inner transformations, healing. How do we make ourselves more calm from the inside so that we can listen better? And I think listening is one of the key things when it comes to being able to act and take relevant actions. So that was one key takeaway for me, that we are looking at outer change, but we got to also look at inner dimensions. Interestingly, there are inner development goals, and I would encourage all of you to go and check those out. In my own interview, I talked about the problems with the word negotiations, because when you say negotiation, the mind always is looking at, when you sit across the table for a negotiation, the mind is always looking at how can I, get more than what I'm giving. That's the key for negotiation the way it shapes the mind. I would be very happy to see someday that we come to a climate conference where we are not tracking negotiations, we are actually tracking climate offerings. And the moment I think about offerings, it just gives me a very different perspective. It just makes the whole thing so positive. Imagine I come to a climate conference, and what am I tracking? I'm not tracking negotiations, I'm actually tracking climate offerings. So I think wordplay is important. It matters. So from negotiations to offerings, I think that might help us move forward. We have to also rethink the theories that we are too attached with. The economic theory of return on investments, even when it comes to climate financing. One of the challenges why climate financing has not reached where it should reach is because we are still looking at return on investment. So the money is being given to the economies which are growing, which has the potential to grow. So there is a bit of a despair here that we are not getting enough finance where it is required, and if the finance is there, then it is not going to the right places. Let's see what happens today. Today is the last day at the COP, and this COP's focus was on financing and technology. So let's see how far we reach. So I think we need to really rethink and reinvent ourselves. It's been a long time, COP29 now. We have been negotiating for climate actions, differentiated but common responsibilities. The process itself has not produced the desired outcomes. So I think it's time that we rethink the process, we rethink our own belief systems, which we are too attached with. And if they're not producing the desired results, then we got to do things differently. The whole process of COP also could potentially be decentralized. We don't have to wait for a centralized world order to emerge. You can potentially think about taking climate actions in your own local realities. COP in my city. You don't have to necessarily come to a global international location. Anyways, I think the participation in the COP is getting scaled down. This year's the Baku COP29 is much smaller in scale as compared to COP28. The next year's COP would be in Brazil, and there are talks already that it might be even smaller participation at the COP. So I think let's take charge while we come here to learn what the world leaders are doing, which is important. But I think with adaptation being the priority now, I think people have to take charge of their own local realities, find their own small circles in which they can do things and take climate actions. So those are some of my reflections from this year's COP. I hope that we do move ahead little more rapidly than what we have been in our climate actions, and we hope that we don't get into a very warmer world. I hope the climate change of the future is still manageable through the actions that we take today. Thank you.